Welcome to Robot House. If you weren't here last week, we changed the name because none of us eat lunch while recording this, and Truth in Advertising got on our backs. Today, we had some recording mishaps. So this is an episode I've actually wanted to do for a while, and Steve did as well. We're going to talk a little bit about the different brands of Japanese action figures and statues and such. Before we start, I just want to make it clear, Steve didn't pay for any of this. This isn't like an advertisement for a store or anything. He's not a sponsor, so this is a subject we wanted to cover. I think he'd appreciate it if you visited Otaku Henshin after, but please don't feel like this is a commercial for anything. This is just something we both wanted to talk about for a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of people too. I mean, there's tons of different types of characters out there that I think a lot of stuff on this list some people might not even have heard of. So I think it's just more of like an informative type of thing.
Yeah, I think it can get confusing, especially if you're new to it, or if even like you're me and you've been watching anime since you were 14, and there's billions of different kinds of figures and stuff, and it can be a little overwhelming. So, you wanted to start with the major brands, Steve?
Yeah, so I mean, there's certainly a lot of brands out there, but I think the ones that see the most attention are obviously Good Smile Company, and then Alter, Kotobukiya, and Bandai. And I mean, Bandai is, I even kind of on my little breakdown, what I wrote up here, I mean, there's just way too many different types of figures from Bandai to even list them all, so I just listed some of the ones that I'm familiar with mostly. So, yeah. I mean, they're definitely really huge. And like I said, there's certainly more on that further on the list that I can mention. But I think one thing that probably is going to be interesting to people is the brands that are actually part of Good Smile Company. So,
there are quite a few. I actually recognize a few of them.
Yeah, I guess why don't I go ahead and just kind of mention what I have listed here. So, I mean, obviously Max Factory, and they're mostly known for the figmas, but they do other scale figures as well. And then Orange Rouge, this is one I definitely have been wanting to talk about for a while, because I think that this one, I mean, no one's ever really heard of it because it's brand new. I think they only started it a few months back, and essentially what it is it's pretty much all male figures, whether it's scale or Nendoroid, and even the figmas as well, that everything under Good Smile Company that seems to be going that way, where the male figures are all going to be put under this Orange Rouge brand, and it is by Good Smile and Max Factory. So, you know, it's not like some random company they brought in to make these. It's still the same people, but it's just rebranded as Orange Rouge.
Yeah, now that you mention it, Nendoroids do tend to be predominantly female, so I guess that makes sense. So it's not like any stylistic difference, like just all these male figures will be grouped under Orange Rouge.
Yeah, I think it's just mostly for the female fans that they kind of have their own little niche group of figures.
I hear you.
Yeah, I mean, so all the big things like that Haikyuu is definitely one that I've been seeing a lot of, and then there's, you know, different ones like Free, the swimming anime, and other things like that. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of where they're going with that. And then a lot of these other ones, like I don't know all the details of how they all came under the Good Smile Company banner, but I know like Phat Company, for example, I'm pretty sure were on their own at first, and I guess they just kind of were joined into the whole Good Smile Company thing. But I've seen their stuff for a while, and then they're Freeing is well, I guess I'll just mention all the names first, and then I'll just kind of talk about the different products later. AQUAMARINE, Penguin Parade, and Wing are all other ones that are probably the biggest ones for what I see come in as far as pre-order opportunities from a distributor. So, I mean, there are other companies as well, but I don't really see them that often, so I didn't think they're worth going into in details. And then as far as Bandai, MegaHouse is under them, and they do a lot of just the scale figures mostly, but they have what is considered like the Gem series, and just they have some other little titles under there, but that's pretty much what they do with those. And then the Tamashii Nations brand is where it gets into all the figure arts and everything.
Okay. Now, I think most of our listeners will be familiar with figFIX. They're mostly Bandai properties now. They used to be a little bit wider in scope. Let's see. Let's move on to Good Smile.
Yeah, so with Good Smile Company, as far as the products that they release themselves, I mean, they do have quite a few scale figures, and I think the primary thing that most people know them for is the Nendoroids. And even within the Nendoroids, they really break it down. I mean, there's a bunch of different types, but I mean, beyond the basic Nendoroids, the two types that I see the most are the Kodi ones, which it's kind of a play on the Japanese term, which would just be the Kodi for coordinate. So what they're Nendoroids that you can actually mix and match their outfits.
Huh.
And it's mostly been Vocaloid ones I've seen, but they've had a few other ones in there. Like Prepara has been another one I've seen. But I mean that's pretty much what those are all about. And then they have the Nendoroid Petites, which are essentially Nendoroid trading figures. And what's neat about them is, they're like little mini Nendoroids, but they still also have where you can swap the faces out. So for example, with Love Live, we'll just use that as an example, that they've had a bunch of different Love Live Nendoroid Petite releases. And so you can still mix and match all the different faces. So, you might have 3 different versions of the same girl, and you can mix and match however you want with the faces at least. So, it's different than your typical trading figure, which is just what you get. Not that it doesn't give you a whole lot, but, it gives you a little bit more you can do with them.
Oh, wow. You didn't think they could make Nendoroids smaller.
Yeah, I mean, the typical Nendoroids are considered 100 millimeters, or about 3.9 inches, as it says. So that's the standard size. And there's some figures that will vary, but the Nendoroids are always that same size.
Yeah. I think some of the Pokemon ones are technically a little taller, right?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about the actual Pokemon that come with the Nendoroids,
yeah,
I think like the Garchomp with Cynthia was a bit taller.
Isn't it only half a Garchomp though?
No, that's a different figure.
Okay.
I'm not sure who that was releasing that, but there was a set of Pokemon figures that were announced recently at Wonderfest that they were it's like half a Pokemon with the trainer. I know they had one of Steven Stone, and I think there was at least one other one I can't remember.
That's weird to me, especially because he'd probably have half a Metagross.
Yeah, that's what it was.
So weird.
I'm not sure why they decided to do that. I mean, it's kind of a weird design, I think.
Like, I can understand, like, Garchomp, like, coming out of the ground, maybe, but, yeah. Oh, well. Let's move on to Max Factory.
So, Max Factory, I mean, they do the scale figures as well, but they mostly work on the figmas.
Yes.
And as far as the figmas, they say that they're supposed to be 1/12 scale size, so of whatever the actual character's height is supposed to be.
Yeah.
So they kind of range between 140 and 160 millimeters. I mean, they may be a little bit higher or lower than that, and that's about 5 to 6 inches. So it just really depends on the height of the actual character. But they also do, now they just started recently the figFIX series, which is the same size as the figmas, but they're posed figures just like the scale figures. But the difference is that they still have the swappable faces, and I think there are a few other things that you can swap out as well. And the whole point is that while they are a scale figure, technically, that you can mix and match with your figmas. So for example, Cardcaptor Sakura, there has already been 2 different figmas of her released, but now there's also a figFIX, so you can still mix and match all of those pieces.
Oh, that's cool. So it's basically like a statue where you can put your other Figma parts. Like if you have 2 links and you want to use the extra face in a cool pose, you can do it like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially, I guess, I know for me at least, that's one of the things that with the posable figures that I don't like, is I just never feel like I can get them into the right pose I want. And then when I finally get it, if someone just bumps my desk or something, I get real pissed because it falls over, and that's the end of that. So yeah, I mean, they usually with the scale figures have them in a decent pose already. So yeah, I think that's kind of the idea.
I feel for you when we get to figFIX. I have some stories of wow. Okay, so I think most people are familiar with Figma because they've been doing a lot of Nintendo figures.
Yeah.
I think they have 4 different links right now. Or 3. Skyward. I know A Link Between Worlds. I think there's one more.
I'm pretty sure. I think that there's actually a Twilight Princess one that they had previewed.
Yeah.
But I don't think that there's anything else out right now. I mean, they do have, for the Nendoroids, they have the Majora's Mask one, as well as, what else I think that they have? I think there was one. Oh yeah, that one. And then they announced the Toon Zelda as well. So.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to Phat exclamation point products.
So yeah, they used to be just called Phat Company, but now they just go by Phat. So the scale figures are again one of their biggest things. But I actually have, for example, I know some of the Infinite Stratus Nendoroids actually have the Phat Company logo on them. So it looks like Good Smile allowed them to do some of their Nendoroids. So I guess the majority of Nendoroids are done by Good Smile Company, but it looks like they do allow some of these other brands to do them as well. And
it might be a situation where they own the rights to Infinite Stratus figures, like, exclusively.
Well, it is actually, it's kind of confusing because they actually started doing them, and then the later released ones were actually Good Smile Company ones. So I'm not really sure what the whole deal was with that. So yeah, I mean, they all look, you wouldn't know based on just looking at them, but if you look at the boxes, you'll see some of them say Good Smile and some of them say Phat. So
that might be a separate podcast.
Yeah.
Finding out the deal there. No, that seems some of these. So they do mostly minifigures, I'm guessing.
Yeah,
from,
well,
all the chews attached to their lines.
Yeah, I mean the scale figures definitely are the biggest line, but I mean the Minicchu and Medicchu are. They're not quite Nendoroid size. I mean, the Minicchu are half the size of Nendoroid, so they're definitely trading figure size. Yeah. The Medicchu are still technically considered trading figures, but they're at least a little bit closer at 70 millimeters compared to 100 for the Nendoroids. And then the Dekacchu is actually they range between 200 to like 220 from what I saw, and they're essentially like a giant Nendoroid type of thing. They're still the deformed size, but it's a giant version.
Oh, that's neat.
So they all kind of look like Nendoroids, but...
okay, so yeah, the super deformed style with a really big head. Okay. And then Parforms are...
Yeah, I think that it's pronounced Parfom, and I'm not really sure exactly... I'm sure that's probably a breakdown of 2 different words or something, but they're kind of a mix between Nendoroids and figmas. From the ones that have been released so far, they all seem to be 140 millimeters or about 5.5 inches. So I think that's probably going to be the standard size. And what they are is, while they do look like Nendoroids because they have the bigger heads, they do have more of a body to them, and their arms and legs, and I think even in the waist, actually have joints, so they are posable. So it's kind of like a mix between a Nendoroid and a figma, since it allows you to pose while it's still kind of in that super deformed state, and they seem to also have the swappable parts as well.
Okay, that's cool.
There's definitely not many of them yet. I know that the 2 that I had available to me were Persona 3 ones. They had one of I never remember how to pronounce it. Is it Aegis or I think and then there's
if Mark was here, he'd be able to tell us.
And then there was another character who I never played the latest release of the game. I don't know if it was, I think it might have been from the PSP version or something, but there was another character who wasn't in the original one that I guess she's related to that character, but they released her, and I think there have been maybe 1 or 2 others, but there's definitely a lot in the works. I saw one, for example, of Momohime from the Muramasa the Demon Blade that looked pretty nice.
Oh, that's... Those characters probably lend themselves to Nendoroids pretty well. They're already kind of super deformed.
Yeah, I mean they're definitely and I'll mention later on too that there's other companies that are kind of following this same type of style as well.
Yeah, I've heard it's hard to find real Nendoroids in the wild. So let's move on to freeing products.
So freeing
company.
Freeing has actually been they are kind of doing what, as I mentioned with Phat, how they did some of the Nendoroids, but it hasn't really been that many with Phat Company. But with Freeing, I've been seeing them grabbing more and more figmas and doing those. They've especially been doing for example, they did the figmas from Virtua Fighter. There was like Akira, and I forget what the other one was, but
Heihachi probably.
But they've been kind of branching out into the figmas a bit more now. So I'm not sure what the deal is with that either, but it seems like they've definitely been doing it more and more versus that Phat seemed like it was just a little bit here and there. So this seems like more of a focus that they've been going. But the scale figures, though, they have two major lines that are definitely ones that people would probably recognize. Is the first one, they've been doing tons of characters and yukatas. And it's just kind of like this yukata line. So, I mean, there's been like the Madoka Magica, and there's been like Tuloveru, and there's been a whole bunch of other series that they've been starting to do these yukata versions. And then they also have the bunny line, which is actually pretty ridiculous. They're 1/4 scale figures, so they kind of range between 14 to 16 inches, depending on the character. Like, the 16-inch one that I saw was actually standing pretty much upright, whereas the Chitoge one from Nisekoi that I have for sale right now she's a little bit hunched over, so I think that's why she's a little bit shorter as far as the height. And there's ones that are laying, so they don't really count that as the height either. So, I mean, they definitely range in size, but they're pretty huge. And like I said, I mean, generally they're about 14 to 16 inches long. So
yeah, they're more statues, I take it.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely, and the bunny ones too. I mean, they have the whole fishnet thing going on, which is actual material, so it's not painted on or anything. So, and they're definitely pretty detailed, but they're also incredibly expensive. So
I'd imagine so.
They're generally they retail at least generally around $220 some a piece. So I mean, I definitely, not just me, but everyone else out there usually charges a lot less. But that's just what the retail price is.
Yeah. Huh. Wow. So let's move on to Aquamarine.
Actually, I'll just might as well hit Aquamarine, Penguin Parade, and Wing all together, because they're just pretty much all just focusing on scale figures, other than that Wing they started doing what they call the SK series, which are pretty much exactly what those Parfom are, but they seem to be about a little bit shorter, not by much. That's 130 millimeters versus 140, so, it's pretty much the same size, but it's exactly the same concept where they have the bigger head with the posable arms and legs and everything. So I don't know if maybe they had attempted at it and then they gave up on it, but because they haven't done any recently, but it looked like they had a couple going in the past.
Okay, yeah, I mean, sometimes I've noticed sometimes they'll just stop a series midway through these figure companies, which can kind of tick me off, especially if I'm trying to collect all the characters I like. But
oh yeah, I think you said something about the One Piece.
yeah, we're almost there.
And then I already kind of mentioned with MegaHouse that they're just pretty much doing the scale figures. The Gem series and the Excellent Model series are two of the ones that are definitely the most notable. The Excellent Model ones, they do include, I know that, because I'll see the name for both, it'll say, for a lot of the One Piece ones, it'll say Excellent Model and Portrait of Pirates. So that's one of the big figure lines, is the Portrait of Pirates that they do for...
those are really hard to find once they've been released. Very expensive, but really nice One Piece statues. It's just, there's one of pretty much every character.
And then they have I forget what they call them. I don't know if it's Dimension of Dragon Ball or something like that, where they have some Dragon Ball ones also.
I haven't seen those in the wild yet. Yeah, I would imagine that probably, since DBZ is kind of back now, I'm sure there is something for that.
So yeah, I guess Tamashii Nations then is, I mean, there's definitely a lot of different types, and obviously the figure-arts, the S.H.Figuarts are the biggest one. There's the Figure Art Zero, which are scale figures, but I honestly, I don't think they're really as nice as your typical scale figure. Then there's the D Arts, which, I mean, they've done some Pokemon ones, like I've seen the Mewtwo and Venusaur and stuff like that, and there's been some Digimons and some other anime and games.
Oh, are there Digimon? I've never seen any of I've seen the Pokemon, and they all go for like $300 now.
Yeah, there has been a few Digimon ones. I don't know how many for sure, but I know I saw them kind of in the list there. And
Bandai's kind of dumb when it comes to Digimon.
The Robot Spirits is pretty cool since, I like the model kits, but I feel like unless you do the actual painting, that when you just put the stickers on model kits, they just don't look as nice. And so the Robot Spirits is kind of the answer to that, where it's an actual figure of the different mobile suits. So, I think those are pretty neat. Then they have the sick figures, which are, I should have actually written down what that stands for exactly, but the whole point of those figures is it's kind of a imagination type of design where they'll take, especially the Kamen Riders. I don't know if they've done other type of figures, but I know the Kamen Rider ones are pretty big, where they'll take the initial design of the Kamen Rider, but they'll kind of, expand upon it and make them look a little ridiculous. I mean, they kind of look more monstrous than anything. So
that explains some of the ads I've gotten in some of my favorites.
Yeah, so I mean they're interesting. I'm just not really a big fan of them since I kind of prefer the figures to look like they should.
Yeah. Well, they do regular figures for all the
right.
Riders.
Yeah. So I mean this is just kind of a branch off of those. Then the Ultra Actor, just pretty much figure arts for Ultraman, and then there's the Armor Girl projects, which are pretty similar to figure arts as well, but they're kind of the girls with the mecha. So I mean there's been some personified Gundams that I've seen, but they've also had, for example, Infinite Stratus, that they're actual IS units that the character themselves.
You can't really do much with Infinite Stratus.
Yeah, I mean the characters are kind of look like a figma, but then you stick them into the mechanical parts for the IS units. So they have that, and then the Kantai collection, the boat girls. So they have all the little boat attachments for them. And then the Tamashii Buddies is just like kind of the last one I figured I'd mention, since they've been kind of popping up a lot recently, where it's just kind of a little figure. They're kind of deformed, and they usually have a little backdrop to them. I know that there's Dragon Ball and Sailor Moon ones, and I know there's a couple other series out there as well.
Okay.
But yeah, we can go a little deeper into the figure arts now. So for one thing I wanted to mention, which is pretty neat, is, and I'm hoping they do this with a lot of other figures that have been released in the figure arts series, but they started doing these, I haven't been able to find it written out any other way than kanji, so I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right without the kana, but I think it's Shikocho Seiho, which essentially, these figures are figure arts, but they're made with an actual skeleton model. So it makes them, if you compare these, so far they've only done Kamen Riders, but if you look at the Kamen Riders from the original figure arts series and compare them to these ones, I mean, there's no comparison, and they just look so much nicer. I mean, they definitely put a lot more detail into the armor, but the fact that the proportions are just perfect, I mean, it just looks just like what you would expect from, just from the suit on the show. So I'm hoping they do that for a lot more.
I feel like I like figure arts. They sell out really fast, and they don't seem to reissue them though. This is like my big problem with them.
Well, I mean that's a really common thing, and that's probably something that should be mentioned in this as well. Is that, I mean, it's not even just one particular series line that's like that, but I mean all of these figures really that are released in Japan, and I mean it's not really the best method for us as consumers, but the way they see it is
not very consumer friendly. So
they pretty much see it as, here is the figure, it's going to be released at this date, so pre-order it before this time, or you're probably never going to get it or pay tons of money for it. So occasionally they'll do reprints. Occasionally they'll do reprints if it's really popular and they know that it's going to sell well, but a lot of times it is, if you don't pre-order the figure, then you're probably not going to find one at a decent price. So yeah, it definitely, the figure arts are like that a lot, but I mean even the scale figures, Nendoroids, it's pretty much all the same.
Yeah, it bugs me. I wanted to collect all the One Piece figure arts, but there's only 4 of them, and only 3 of them are the main cast. bugs me. I have Luffy, which FYI, the joints for these figures aren't the best.
Yeah.
So he's kind of hard to pose. He comes with a really big arm that's completely worthless. You have to use that entire prop stand he comes with to hold it up.
Yeah, actually, I just got the Cure Beat figure art from, it was one of the pre-Cure ones that she has a guitar, and then she comes with an additional stand piece to put on the guitar to keep it propped up. I mean, if you put it up against her skirt, it's not really a big deal, but yeah, it definitely doesn't stay in her hands well since it's a little heavy.
I've heard the Sailor Moon ones are nice, but again, very expensive, and you have to pretty much go to a con and hope they have them on clearance.
Yeah, and it's really difficult too because the figure arts are pretty exclusive, so even for me, it's not really that easy to get them. Yeah. And there's some.
I mentioned they have a line called Variable Action Heroes for One Piece that I wanted to see if you could get in, but yeah, they seem like they're very hard to find.
Yeah, and what sucks too with Bandai is that they've been doing a lot of things with their Bandai Premium website, and so on there's a lot of items that they'll do as limited edition releases on the Bandai Premium website only. And what sucks even worse about that is not only does that mean that retailers can't get those items, but it also means that because of how Bandai is, they restrict it to sales in Japan only. So if you try to use, like there's companies out there that you could use for, I'm trying to remember exactly what they call them, but it's a type of company where they accept packages and ship them out to you once they receive them. I can't remember exactly what the term is for that, but they actually recognize addresses for those types of places, because I've actually tried to do it, and they refuse to ship to those people. So you really don't have any way to get them unless you get somebody. Well, this is actually how I've been getting some of these pre-cures, is I have to find an actual person in Japan that can get them shipped to them, their home, and then they will ship them out to me. So it's definitely a lot of work to get some of these in.
Bandai's kind of a crappy company.
Yeah, and then I feel like for what you pay for them too, I mean they're still nice. I mean, don't get me wrong, but I feel like if you compare them to the figmas, for example, I mean there's a huge quality difference. It's just
definitely, it's not even a question. Like the sculpts are nice, but like I said, the joint quality is really crappy. You can't really. It's better to just leave them in the box.
What's funny too is, I mean, normally I've just been getting them, just one figure obviously at a time, but for some of these pre-cure, I've actually had them for sale. Like I have Cure Beat right now that I have a couple of, and when you actually look at them all together at the same figure, you'll start to notice things like she has a bow on her outfit on the chest, and on the one, the bow is a little bit more to the left, and so I mean, it's just they're really, there's some little things where if you just have one of that figure, it looks fine, but if you compare it to multiple ones, you can see that each of them might slightly vary in some way.
Oh yeah, I've noticed that actually. With the few I have, it's not. I don't know. Like, I assume these are made in China. I just don't think they put too much thought into them.
Yeah, I mean, actually, pretty much every figure is made in China. Yeah. I mean, even the scale figures and all that, but I just think it's just how Bandai does it, because the figmas, for example, are actually sculpted by the same type of people that do these scale figures and the Nendoroids, and then, like I said, those ones are definitely a lot more expensive. I mean, you might be looking possibly up to $20 difference between a figure arts and a figma, and I mean they those ones I've definitely looked at, and they all look the same when you look at the figures, so they definitely have that down because of the sculpt. I just think that Bandai kind of makes things a little bit cheaper, and that's just what causes that. And that's why I said the Figure Art Zero line is one of their scale figure lines that, if you compare them to other scale figure lines, I honestly feel like they look more like the Band Presto figures that you would get in like a UFO crane game, versus like something that you would actually, like one of these actual really detailed scale figures. Yeah. So I mean, they do good stuff, but I mean, it's just not, I feel like it just doesn't really compare to what else is out there. But since they claim all of these brands, you're never going to see them anywhere other than Bandai, so you don't really have a choice.
Okay, so before we continue, let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back, finish up the summary, and get into our main discussion. Welcome back. Hope you had a nice break, everyone. So next up, we were going to talk about Alter.
Yeah, and the Alter, so again, they're mostly scale figures, but they do have some different mecha figures that, I know there was ones, for example, I saw from Full Metal Panic that you can actually open up the cockpits and stuff, so, I mean, they come with all kinds of different accessories. I wasn't sure if maybe they were model kits or not, but it looks like they're just actual figures of the different mecha from shows. And
in my experience, model kits rarely have any like interactive features like that.
Yeah, some of the really expensive Gundam figures model kits do, but yeah, a lot of times they don't have too much with them.
On the perfect grade, because they're like screwed together, not snapped together, like the cheaper ones. They're pretty sturdy, and they can do cool stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then,
I'm sorry, Steve.
Oh yeah, that's just the other thing is they do a lot of trading figures as well, and it's not so much a lot of the trading figures that I'm used to seeing are kind of more on the super deformed side, but these ones look to be generally more actual scale type of figures, but they're just smaller. So
I prefer those.
I think those are definitely good for people who are just starting out that don't really want to pay $100 for a figure. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's not too much else to say. Mostly they are doing the scale figures, and they're definitely my second favorite as opposed, compared to Good Smile.
Yeah.
And then Kotobukiya, they definitely they're scale figures. I mean, they do a lot of anime ones still, but they've actually been really starting to focus on the American stuff. I've seen a lot of things from American movies, American video games like Halo, things like that. And there's been a lot of comic book. I've seen tons of DC and Marvel characters. It seems like they've been doing a lot more DC than Marvel, though, but it seems like they're doing a lot of, all the different comic book stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think it's probably because Disney. I'm sure Disney has a Japanese figure branch.
Well, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of weird with Disney because, I mean, for example, I had the Anna and Elsa Nendoroids, for example, there. So a Good Smile company has some Disney stuff, and there's also, they already announced an Elsa figma as well. And so, obviously there's some Disney in there, and then since Disney owns Marvel, they also have all the Marvel Nendoroids that have been being released. And what's weird about those is that all of the Disney and Marvel figures from Good Smile Company are not available to American retailers, only to Japanese retailers. So it seems like some weird Disney rule where they won't allow...
Oh yeah, they do region-specific stuff. They've always done that, though. Like, we could do a whole show on how weird Disney is about keeping brands separate in different countries.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I haven't really gotten in any of the comic book stuff since I'm trying to focus, or at least right now, on the anime. But, once things get a little bit bigger, then I'll probably branch out a little bit more. But I'm honestly not sure if the Kotobukiya Marvel figures are available in the U.S. or not. I know the DC ones definitely are.
Yeah, I know I've seen the Batman before. It looked pretty cool. It was, I don't want to say Japanified, but it was definitely a more manga-style Batman.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, they have an interesting style to their figures, and I've actually, even beyond the comic book characters, I've noticed it with the anime figures as well. It's something that it's kind of neat, but it kind of bothers me at the same time. Like, there's a lot of figures where, for example, they've done some Tales of Zestiria ones where I just feel like the faces just look really off. You know, it doesn't look like how they should, but it does fit. If you look at other figures, it seems to fit the style that they do. So I think it's not that they're doing a bad job of recreating the character, but it's just that
they're just doing it in their house style.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And then I think most people are familiar with Metacom.
The real action heroes are one of the things I see the most, and those are, they call them 1/6 scale, but every one I looked at seemed like they were 300 millimeters, or it's like 11.7 inches. So I don't know if they really truly are scale, since I doubt every single character is the same height that they do. So
yeah. And, what properties do they generally cover?
It's definitely a mix. I mean, it's mostly the anime, but they have been doing some other things. Like there's a Link, real action hero. So it looks like they're starting to branch into like Nintendo and stuff. But they also have the I think it's pronounced MegaHouse, but it stands for Miracle Action Figure, and those Miracle Action Figure EX, and those ones are kind of more of a smaller scale on the real action heroes, and those are a little bit closer to. They're essentially about the same size as figmas and figure-arts.
Okay, that's cool. And then they do statue. Or no, I'm sorry, that's a different company. Medicchus.
Yeah, those two kind of get confusing because they're almost the same, except for that Medicom versus Medicchus. But Medicchus Entertainment, they do the super action statues, which are again around the same size as the figmas and figure-arts, but the ones that they're mostly been doing the JoJo figures. I mean, they've done tons of those, and I know recently they've announced other ones, like they've been doing Tokyo Ghoul, and they've been also doing they had the Shinichi from Parasite, the Maximum. So I mean, they're kind of branching. It seems like they're trying to. They all kind of have a certain style to them as well. They all kind of have this like kind of gritty look to them, I feel. So it seems like that's what they're going for.
I think that fits for the properties you mentioned. I honestly never thought I'd get a Shinichi figure.
Yeah, I do have a few of them on order coming in. So I forget when they're supposed to be. I feel like it was maybe this summer.
Okay, and then I know we added a sort of last minute. Do you want to talk a little bit about Revoltech?
Yeah, they're another one that's been kind of big, and once again, this is another one I've seen Disney in, since there's the Woody Revoltech.
Yeah, there's a lot of different Revoltechs. There are Ninja Turtle Revoltechs.
There's so many.
Are completely sold out.
There's so many pictures on the internet of the Woody Revoltech, because he has this like really creepy smile as one of the faces you can use for him.
Well, that's his default for when he's acting like a toy. But yeah, I can see where that would be horrifying.
They've just put him in so many wacky positions, and I've seen even where they've taken the face and just stuck it on other things. And like there was one where they swapped his arms and legs to make him look kind of like some weird creature, and he's just smiling at the character, and they're huddled in a corner. So it's kind of a big thing I've seen on figure images.
Well, he is kind of oddly proportioned. I can see where that wouldn't really work for Revoltech style.
And again, with these, they seem to be on that same scale. It seems like most of the posable figures are about that same size there, and around
They're
6
all
inches.
6 inches. Yeah. I should note, if you're interested in Revoltechs, they are super fragile. Like, the few I have all broken at least one piece.
Yeah, I've never had any of them, so I didn't know how they work quality-wise.
I made the mistake of getting the full drill-rised Gurren Lagann. Not a lot of drills left on them. I also have, I don't know if anyone remembers it, Overman King Gainer.
I know I would always hear about that one a lot, since I think it was at TekoshiCon where the guy who did Lord Zed's voice, he came to TekoshiCon quite a few times, and he, I guess, was in the dub for that, so he mentioned that quite a few times.
You might know it as the anime where the Max Monkey dance in the theme song. Like parts of him have completely snapped, and I've rarely, if ever, like touched him. He was more of just a display piece because I thought the design was cool. So yeah, they're kind of fragile. I don't know if they've fixed that with newer figures. I also have a Ryu laying around here. He's a little smaller though.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely possible they might have fixed it, since I've seen, like, the Preacher figure arts, for example, is something that they had a huge issue because they all have giant hair for the most part.
Yeah, I know.
And they would make the hair as a giant chunk of plastic.
Yeah.
So they would not want to stand upright, or their heads would just be slunched over. So, they've definitely improved upon that, and they finally hollowed out the hair. So,
yeah. I know the Sailor Moon ones, her individual pigtails have articulation.
Yeah, that's how they are for the most part with that, because they give you that in the hair so that you can kind of pose them when midair fighting and things like that. But it seems like a lot of companies like that have improved upon them as they've come out. So I'm sure that these have probably come a long way as well.
I think so. I guess that they're very hard to find, like the ones I want, because they're all older, but they're still nice. I will say, of all the figures we've talked about, the joints on Revoltex never go bad. And that is because you can just order new ones. They're all reassemblable. Some of them have custom joints to make them look better, but they're all universal pieces. And yeah, you can just go and order more if one breaks. But they rarely do. They're this little ratchet system. It's pretty neat. So let's move on. The last one you wanted to talk about, Dai Molto Bene?
Yeah, I'm not really sure exactly how you pronounce it. They seem to be a fairly newer company, but what they did was they started releasing these Minissimo figures that are, it's that same deal where they're trying to go for that Nendoroid style, but they've given them a little bit smaller of a head and added a bit more to the body. So it kind of, these ones don't seem to be as posable. They seem to be more like the Nendoroids that come with some swappable parts to give them some posing. But it's just another one in that line. They all seem to be about the 110 millimeters, so they're just slightly taller than a Nendoroid. But I do have I got notification of they have a pre-orders opening for Josuke from JoJo Part 4. So I think I'll probably just get a couple in just to kind of get a look at what these are like.
Okay. We'll probably have. I think as we'll just have pictures of the various figures running through this episode. So hopefully people will be able to take a look at some of these.
Oh yeah, and then I forgot too. I wanted to mention. I think we kind of skipped over real quick back with Kotobukiya that they actually have I think it's pronounced Q Poche.
Oh yeah.
And those are again like those Parfoms and just like I guess not so much like these Minissimos that we just mentioned. So like I said, those are a little bit closer to Nendoroids, but there was the SK series from Wing was what I was mentioning too, or like that. But they're the same deal with the kind of posable Nendoroid type of look, where they have the posable joints. But these ones are kind of neat because they actually have magnets in their feet, and their stands are also magnetized, so it helps them stay in place better since they
Oh man, that sounds so much better than what we have to deal with.
So I was really interested in these, and I haven't gotten any of them yet, so I did actually order today the Black Magician Girl just to see how it works. She comes with magic cylinders and some other accessories.
Oh, that's cool. I'll say she does. No, I'm kidding. Mark will be happy to know if that's a good figure. he loves DMG. So that's cool. I'll have to take a look at those too. So they do like Yu-Gi-Oh and stuff?
Well, I think she was just kind of an exception that they did one of her. I mean, they might do some more in the future, but from what I've seen, it looks like they've done some Sword Art Online. They've done Oraimo. They've done Madoka. And there's been a few other ones I've seen as well. I just can't remember them all off the top of my head. It seems like they're kind of focusing on the more popular stuff. Oh, they did do one of Hestia from Danmachi.
Remember that trend? I don't think she's as popular as she was last year. But
yeah, there was a ton of figures of her that were announced after the series started. But yeah, it seems like it's really died down. It's kind of disappointing because I definitely have some more coming in, and I'm hoping that people are still interested.
Well, hot take. I think it's because the show wasn't that good, but that is kind of lame that you're gonna probably be stuck with a couple of those figures. But hey, maybe some Hestia fans will we'll help you out.
What is kind of nice though with these figures is, and this is not necessarily me saying this as a business, but it's more as an individual who collects as well, because I've noticed when I moved, I moved locations out of state about a year ago. And when I did that, I ended up selling the majority of my figures at the time just so I didn't have to lug everything. And I couldn't believe what I got for some of these figures, that, just because as they age, it just seems like when they become really hard to come by, the prices just skyrocket on these things. So, I mean, that's always kind of a nice thing, that even if you hang on to something for a long time, that if you go to sell it later, that, you might end up being surprised what you get for it.
I wish I could do that. Again, most of my figures are destroyed because apparently they are not meant to be touched ever. But okay, so I think we've covered all the main stuff. There's some discussion topics you wanted to do.
Yeah, I think some of them we might have already kind of gotten into, like with the scale figures. I can't really say much more other than that I feel that comparing all the different brands that do them, that I think that Good Smile Company definitely does the nicest looking ones. But
yeah, in my experience, I don't really care for statues as a collector. I feel like if I'm paying all that money, I want something that I can move. So, but Good Smile, I think, they look the best.
And then Max Factory, I mean, they're pretty close too, and I definitely really like Alter a lot.
Yeah. I would say it's not that Bandai's are bad. They're just way overpriced, especially for the size. Because like the Portrait of Pirate figures are all like 6, 7 inches, and they can be upwards of $100.
Yeah, they definitely are somewhere between 80 to 100 from what I've seen.
Yeah, a lot of One Piece figures are overpriced, but I mean, those in particular. I don't know. We can probably do posable because.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest discussion difference. I mean, I know we've talked a lot about the figure arts already. Yeah. I think comparing them, I've kind of already started to compare them to the figmas about the difference in the quality. But
I mean, I don't own any figma, but I can tell just by looking at them, the quality is leaps and bounds over anything Bandai's doing right now.
One thing I will mention about the figmas, though, is I'm not sure what the reason is. It seems like a lot of them, when they design them, though, the necks kind of don't go straight up. It has a little bit more of like an arch forward, and
yeah,
it doesn't look too bad on some characters, but I feel like some of the ones where they're just wearing normal clothes, like for example the Love Live girls, that they're just wearing school outfits, that they look a little bit weird to me, but it's not too bad.
It's probably because the heads are meant to be swapped. In some cases.
Yeah, I mean, they all do have the swappable faces and everything, so it might be just due to that.
That's probably it. Neck articulation on toys has always been a big problem.
It's funny, actually, the Precure figure arts, because of that hair issue, they included an extra neck piece that was a solid piece that didn't bend, so that way, if you wanted to keep their head like straight up, that you could do it. But now you don't really need it as much, but it's kind of funny that they included that.
It's funny you mentioned the slanty neck, because I used to collect Marvel Legends, and they all had that problem. They would all, no matter what you did, look like they were staring at the floor. And on bigger, like, less proportionate figures, like Juggernaut or Colossus, it wasn't such a big deal, because their necks were pretty much not there. But you would get like a tiny figure like Spider-Man, and his neck would always just like be slanted in such a weird way. So yeah, I know how you feel with regards to that. I just think it's something toy makers can't really get a handle on. It's hard to make a proportionate body for a toy and still make it fun to play with.
Yeah, and actually I think that's kind of one of the things I've noticed, especially with the figure arts too, is that the Kamen Riders actually are really, really nice looking compared to the actual human type of characters that, they're not wearing the whole armor. So I think it's mostly because of the helmets and everything.
Yeah, they can cheat. So, because Kamen Riders have broad shoulders, and he really can't look down. so they don't have to worry about that on the neck. So he only has to be able to look left and right.
Yeah, and I haven't really seen, since they do a lot of the Star Wars ones, I know that there's ones of the actual, like there's like Luke and other characters, so I'm not sure what those ones really look like up close. I just have Kylo Ren, and I mean, he's more on the line with the Kamen Riders, where he looks really nice, but it's mostly because he's wearing the helmet and everything.
Yeah, exactly. It's easier. It's easier to cheat, especially he has a cape.
Yeah.
So, again, they can hide his shoulders. It doesn't look as unnatural.
And actually, I mean, you can remove the cape from him, and he still doesn't look too bad. But I mean, I think it's just mostly just the fact that, I mean, a lot of what I have too, as far as the actual humanoid ones, are the Precure ones. So I mean, they're kind of like little girls, so they got to make them a lot more, skinny arms and skinny bodies and everything. So definitely makes it harder to get them to look right.
Yeah, female figures are really tricky to do. I will say, even figFIX are better than some of the American attempts.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying. I feel like a lot of what I had seen in the past, at least when I used to collect the toys from just American release stuff, that I just always felt like the quality was just never really that great. But I don't know. I don't know if they've improved much over the years.
Not really. As plastic prices have gone up, the size of the figures has actually gone down a bit, and the quality, I think, has dropped. It's sad. Also, I think the fact is, people mock anime for its weird proportions, but that actually makes for a better toy. Like, Mrs. Fantastic, no matter what you do, is never going to look like a real person as a toy, if she has any level of posability. Because you have to put a joint in her waist, and you have 2 joints in her hip. And superheroes don't really wear clothes, they wear spandex jumpsuits. So you see all those joints. You can't really cheat.
Yeah.
But, I mean, all that over-design stuff that people make fun of anime for actually works in the favor of a better figure.
Yeah, luckily with the Precure, I mean, you can see it in the elbows and the knees, but it's not as easy to see anywhere else.
There was a line of figures, I recall, that they hid the joints with like some sort of covering. I can't recall who it was, but I thought that was pretty neat.
Yeah, I'm not really sure.
It was a long time ago. I can't even remember the name. I know it was a Magical Girl series, though, that they debuted. I'll have to look it up later. I'll put it in the show notes if I find it.
I mean, overall, I mean that's like I said. I feel like the joint things is just kind of, as far as for display purposes, I don't think look as nice. But I mean, it definitely for posability. I mean, just to be able to do fun things with them. Because I've seen, it's actually a pretty big deal on Instagram, is all this figure photography. And I've seen a lot of really interesting ones where, it's just kind of neat things using characters from a series together. And then they've been doing a lot of mix and match of like characters from different shows meeting up, and they put them in all kinds of wacky positions. So it's definitely like, even like one of the examples I showed you guys when I saw that one with the Kylo Ren, with him playing some arcade with a stormtrooper and losing and flipping out.
Yeah, I saw that.
So it's just, there's just been a lot of fun things that people have done with the posable figures. So that's why I've definitely come to like them a lot more now. That just what you can do with them.
It's fun now because there's so many. I used to do that with my Transformers because they had the master grade Transformers, and I was still collecting the regular figures at the time. So I had one with Grimlock holding master grade Megatron as a gun, and there were 2 Optimus Primes, and one was the perfect one that's like 2 feet tall, and the other one was the regular toy line guy. It's a 6-inch figure. And I'm like, and I sent it to everybody. I think this was before you started working with us. And I sent it, I'm like, me not know who to shoot. It's fun messing with toys like that.
That's another thing too, is the Nendoroids are a big deal on Instagram too. That the fact that they're all the same size and the parts are the same, that you can swap out the parts and the faces with any of the Nendoroids really. So there's a lot of Nendoroids that come with super wacky faces, like Umaru has one, for example, and I've seen them being used on other Nendoroids to just get them in some more interesting things.
You can do that with figFIX to a degree.
Yeah, and the figmas are a little bit more standard where you can do that with them too. But yeah, I mean the figure-arts, I think that at least if they're from the same style, like the Precures, I'm sure you could swap their faces if you wanted. But I don't know if you could necessarily swap a Precure with, another character from a different show if they're designed a little differently.
Well, I mean, if you swap their faces, how would you be able to tell that you swapped them, Steve?
What do you mean?
No, I'm just joking. I'm saying they all look the same.
Oh.
I know. I'm being a jerk. It's like when people say, well, they're like Betty and Veronica. If you switch their hair color, you wouldn't be able to tell who was Betty and who was Veronica. It's a little less noticeable with Precure, though, because they are different heights and stuff. They actually have different body types.
Yeah, there's actually, it's kind of interesting that they do even put that into the figures. Like, the one series, Sweet Precure, they have these really, really skinny outfits going on. Like, their waists are way skinnier than, it doesn't even look realistic, but yeah. The figures actually kind of look similar versus if you compare them to the other ones that have wider waists, that you can see that they did make them based on the design of the show.
I've heard, I haven't seen the Sailor Jupiter one, but I hear that all the Sailor Scouts use the same body, which is kind of disappointing to me.
Yeah, I've had Uranus and Neptune in stock, but I never opened them to see what they looked like.
Yeah, they're supposed to be visibly taller, and so is Jupiter, so I kind of hope that's not the case. I do like some of the variants they did for Sailor Moon. They did Nephrite as Evil Sailor Moon.
Oh yeah, I saw that one.
Which apparently was a Comic-Con exclusive, so that's always fun to track those down. But I don't know. I think we've covered pretty much everything. As a toy collector in general, I prefer Japanese figures now. American toys, well, they don't all suck, but the things I'm interested in kind of do. Like, they're good Ninja Turtle figures, but they're like $50 for one. Or a Comic-Con exclusive that I can, maybe if I'm lucky, find for $1,000. Like, I don't know if you saw it, they made arcade painted variants of the NECA Ninja Turtle toys, so they look like they're from the 80s arcade game.
Is this American ones, or? Yeah,
it's America. I posted it on my wall, and it's a Comic-Con exclusive. It comes with the different foot soldier colors and stuff that you only see in the video games. It's really neat, and it's like $200 there. But if I wanted to get that, it would be like $700 after the show, and I'll probably never be able to find it. It's really disappointing. Japanese toys don't really spike like that.
Yeah, I mean, they usually go up more after years of being out of print, not necessarily just because it was like just one time. Yeah,
like the Pokemon ones are absurd, but that's because they're popular. But I'm sure, like, if I wanted a Kamen Rider Forze, I could find it for a semi-reasonable price.
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of looked around. I've seen that the figure arts of like the Kamen Riders, for example, have pretty much been about the same price. I mean, they haven't really changed much.
It also helps they're not really sold out anywhere. so there's no incentive to raise the prices. Like, I used to go to Big Bad Toy Store before I realized that they were gouging, especially in Japanese figures.
Yeah, I think what they tend to do is they have a lot of the Bandai exclusive, the web exclusive items that they'll list on there, and they're obviously going to pay full price for them, and then they got to mark them up. But I feel like their markups are a little absurd.
they can be, because they're a normal retailer. Like, you can buy American toys, you can buy by the shipping box, which will basically give you every figure in a line, and then some, for if you want extras for some reason. But you can't do that with their Japanese stuff, and they're a big enough website that they probably have a guy in Japan that buys all this stuff for them. But what are you gonna do? So I think we're done. Is there anything else you wanted to cover?
No, I mean, I was thinking about some of the other topics that I wrote down, but I think that like for example, the Nendoroids versus like the Kupochi things and stuff like that. But I feel like we pretty much discussed all the differences. I mean, it's mostly in the posability of some of them versus the Nendoroids.
Yeah. It's a pity Mark wasn't here, because he does like the Funko Pop finals, and I think you guys could probably have a discussion about that.
Yeah,
versus Nendoroids.
I mean, those have definitely been popping up all over the place. I mean, I'd see them at like Hot Topic a lot, but now I see them I've seen them even in Target. So it's
Walmart has exclusives. Barnes and Noble gets exclusives.
I mean, it's kind of I get the idea. I mean, it's a cheap figure for if you're just trying to collect a bunch of different types,
well,
but
it's literally the same figure.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really. I guess I definitely can see someone wanting to collect them just because it's kind of a standard type of thing. But yeah. I think that if you want more detail, then you kind of have to look elsewhere.
Yeah, that's the problem. The only option you have for like Marvel characters is Hasbro, and like as I said earlier, they're not the best looking things. So you pretty much are stuck with statues, or you can buy those $500 Chinese action figures.
Yeah, I think that Japan really gets that too, because it's not just the figmas and the Nendoroids, but there's figurarts. They're all starting to go towards doing a lot of these comic book characters and things like that, because I think they realize
it's an untapped market.
They definitely see a market for it for sure.
We didn't talk about Hut Toys, probably because no one really wants to buy this. But maybe we'll do another show on those someday. Have you ever carried any of those or wanted to buy any of them?
I'm actually, I don't even know, maybe I'm just not thinking straight right now, but I'm not even sure exactly which ones you're talking about.
They're figures based on movies. They're usually like $400 to $500. They're insanely detailed. Like, they made a Scarlet, they're 6 to 7 inches tall, I think. And they look exactly like the character from the movie, right down to the face. They did Batman and Heath Ledger, and that really got them on the map. Heath Ledger, Joker.
I might have seen them, and I just didn't know exactly what they were. But yeah, it doesn't really sound too familiar off the top of my head.
I'm not surprised. It's super high end. Like for a normal collector, that's not something you'll ever be able to afford.
I don't know if it's part of it or not. I know I've seen ones for like Star Trek characters from the newer Star Trek movies that looked kind of realistic, but I don't know if those are part of that or not.
They're part of it. Again, we could probably do an episode on that if I do a little more research. Yeah, I think that'll be it for this week.
Oh, yeah, I could mention make sure you look at what you're buying when you're looking at scale figures, because there are some out there that are considered 18 plus, so some clothes will come off.
We didn't cover the adult figure section. Usually you can tell. They're mostly statues, but there's some that aren't. You find that out by accident after you bought them. Most websites will be kind enough to keep them separate.
Yeah. I mean, I think another thing that we can do in the future, too, is probably talk about some of the counterfeit ones out there.
Oh, yeah. There's a huge counterfeit industry. I think anyone who's gone to a con can attest to that. Always try to buy from reliable stores, like Otaku Henshin. So, yeah, I think that'll be it for this episode. We actually got a lot more out of this than I thought we would. So, yay. Let's pull up my show notes so I can read us the end crawl. Thanks for listening to Robot House. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy our content. We cover pretty much all kinds of popular culture, anime, American TV, things like that. You can follow us on Twitter at KingRiptor. That's where I post new episodes. Sometimes I tweet, but not much. You can follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/RobotHousePodcast. And you can follow Steve in particular on Otaku Henshin, facebook.com/Otaku Henshin online. That's just the Facebook page if you need to get to Steve directly for whatever reason. And then OtakuHenshin.com is the store itself. Give it a look. maybe we'll have a coupon code in the show notes for a % off on a figure that maybe we covered today. And then if you have any questions or comments, we have a Google Doc link in the show notes. I check it sporadically, but we will answer every question that's on there. So thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.